The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the longest-running and most complex territorial disputes in modern history, driven by religious, historical, and political claims to the same land. This video is the first in a 5-part series explaining the history and possible future of the conflict. The 4 remaining parts will be coming out over the next 4 days, so if you don't want to miss them, hit that subscribe button right now. Both Israelis and Palestinians believe they have legitimate rights to the region historically known as Palestine, now largely comprising Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. The deep-seated roots of this conflict stretch back thousands of years, with both groups anchoring their claims in religious and historical narratives. For Israelis, the claim to the land is inseparable from their religious and national identity. Their connection to the land of Israel dates back over 3,000 years, to biblical times. According to Jewish tradition, the land, specifically Jerusalem and its surroundings, was promised to the Jewish people by God in the Hebrew Bible, making it a central part of their faith. The historical significance of the land to Jews begins with the patriarch Abraham, whose covenant with God is seen as the first divine promise of the land to the Jewish people. The Kingdom of Israel was established around 1000 BCE under King David, with Jerusalem as its capital, further cementing the Jewish connection to the land. Beyond religious significance, the Jewish people's historical claim to the land also rests on the existence of an ancient Jewish presence in the region. Archaeological evidence supports that Jewish communities lived in Israel for centuries, facing several invasions and occupations by foreign powers, including the Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans. And the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE by the Romans marked the beginning of the Jewish diaspora. But even in exile, Jewish communities maintained a spiritual and emotional connection to the land of Israel. The concept of returning to Zion, which refers to the Jewish longing for a return to their homeland, has been central to Jewish identity throughout centuries of exile. However, the modern political claim to Israel began in earnest with the rise of the Zionist movement in the late 19th century. As Jews in Europe faced rising anti-Semitism, including pogroms in Eastern Europe and Russia, Zionism called for the establishment of a Jewish homeland where Jews could live safely and independently. The Zionist movement, led by figures like Theodor Herzl, chose Palestine as the location for this homeland, given its historical and religious significance. Jewish immigration to Palestine increased in the early 20th century, driven by a desire to escape persecution and build a national home. This immigration grew significantly after World War II and the Holocaust, when the need for a secure Jewish state became even more urgent in the aftermath of genocide. For Palestinians, the claim to the land is no less profound. Palestinians are primarily Arab and predominantly Muslim, with a small minority of Christians. They trace their history in the region back centuries, viewing themselves as the indigenous people of Palestine. Long before the rise of Zionism or the establishment of Israel, Palestinians lived in the land, working as farmers, merchants, and city dwellers in towns like Jerusalem, Jaffa, Hebron, and Haifa. During the Ottoman Empire, which controlled the region for nearly 400 years, Palestine was home to a diverse population, with Arabs making up the majority. Palestinians see themselves as having deep historical ties to the land, not just as individuals or families, but as a community that lived, worked, and developed their culture there for generations. Palestinian national consciousness began to take shape during the early 20th century, especially as Jewish immigration to the region increased under British rule. After World War I, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed, Palestine came under British control as part of the League of Nations mandate system. Palestinian Arabs began to see Zionism and Jewish immigration as a threat to their own national aspirations. This tension exploded into violence during the 1936-1939 Arab Revolt against both British colonial rule and Jewish immigration. Palestinians rejected the idea of partitioning the land between Jews and Arabs, as proposed by the United Nations in 1947, because they saw it as an unjust division of what they considered their homeland. The creation of Israel in 1948 was a turning point in the conflict. For Jews, it marked the realization of their dream of returning to their ancestral homeland after centuries of persecution. For Palestinians, however, it was the beginning of what they call the Nakba, or catastrophe, when hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs were displaced from their homes, either through forced expulsion or out of fear of violence. Many Palestinians fled to neighboring countries like Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, where they became refugees. The memory of this displacement remains a powerful part of Palestinian identity and fuels their ongoing claim to the land. The religious significance of the land to both Jews and Muslims adds another layer of complexity to the conflict. For Jews, Jerusalem is the holiest city, the site of the ancient temple and the capital of the ancient Jewish kingdom. For Muslims, Jerusalem is also sacred because it is home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. According to Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven from the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque during his night journey. This makes Jerusalem a central focus for both religious communities, and both Israelis and Palestinians view it as integral to their national and religious identities. At the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a clash between two deeply held national narratives. For Israelis, the land is their ancestral and biblical home, a place where Jews can finally live in security after centuries of persecution. For Palestinians, it is their homeland, where their families lived for generations before being displaced by the creation of Israel. Both sides see their claims as just and rooted in history, religion, and identity, which makes the conflict so intractable. In many ways, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not just about land, but about identity, belonging, and historical justice. Both Israelis and Palestinians feel that their claims to the land are legitimate and that their histories and struggles give them the right to live there. This deeply emotional and existential conflict, rooted in centuries of history, is one of the reasons why peace has been so difficult to achieve and why both sides continue to fight for their place in this contested land.